Hi everyone, I'm Anna Fang with Zhenfund. So we're an early stage VC in China. We manage about a little over $1 billion, both USD and China funds, and we have about 600 portfolio companies, of which 14 are unicorns, companies like VIP Kid, which is the largest online English teaching company in China, MCI, which is a food delivery to logistics company to restaurants, a bunch of AI companies, and Little Red Book, Xiaohongshu, which is like the Instagram of China. But my focus is mainly on the consumer internet sector.
Super. Francis?
Well, I had been an investment banker for almost 30 years until 2006, just before the financial crisis. I left investment banking in 2006. My last job was the chairman of Citigroup Investment Banking Asia. Since then, I moved to the buy side doing venture and angel investing, investing my own money with a small family office. Initially I focused mainly on Greater China. In the last 3 years, I started to increase my investments in the US and Israel, and recently make some investment in Europe, and mainly through investment in the firstminute capital as an LP. My interests now focus more on the new technology, artificial intelligence, and so on. I'm also a senior advisor to CVC, which is a buyout fund. So I also cover the late stage companies as well as advisor to CVC.
Great. So you've seen all the stages that sort of similar to Brent. Maybe Brent, it could be your intro.
Okay, super quick because I know some of the people here. So I did lastminute.com 20 years ago. So that was one of the first tech unicorns in Europe. So an exit in 2005, a very long time ago. Since then, made.com, which is a pretty successful online furniture retailer right across Europe. And then MCI Capital, which is the venture fund, which has some amazing LPs. And actually has 31 founders of billion-dollar technology businesses backing it, and includes Tencent and JC Decor and Henkel and various others. And then do a lot to support entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship, and Founders Factory and Founders Forum are two of those. Founders Factory is a multi-sector corporate-backed incubator and accelerator. You can tell I've said that before. And that's enough for me.
That's great. And picking up from Tomasz's presentation, it definitely looks like a blowout year for Europe, and really amazing things happen in European tech in 2018. So if we pick it up from there and we sort of stick to our core Vadis topic, what's next for Europe? What are some of the biggest opportunities and challenges for European tech in this year and in the years to come?
So funnily, I've had 3 companies pitch us 3 European ideas in the past month, and they were all around mobility. But for Europe, because we're looking a little bit into Southeast Asia and India, and the nice thing there is there's a huge population and population density, and you can start from scratch, which I don't really see as possible.
I think what is important is to create an ecosystem, okay? Which means that, first of all, I think that the government can play an important role. The government can build good infrastructure, right? Like 4G, 5G with a lot of bandwidth and so on, right? That would really create innovation and create a lot of applications.
We'd like to know your view on that. Where you think which specific business models and sectors will make European companies kind of next SAP and Spotify, yes? Brent, I think you have a long time experience in Europe. What's your insider view?
I think one of the areas where Europe hasn't really delivered yet, so maybe it will, is actually education technology. So if you look at EdTech, we have the best brands in the world. I think that's pretty well okay. You can say America's got a few good ones. The one I still think is interesting, which I think is a race that governments may need to put more money into to capitalize, is robotics. And obviously, fintech, because we have the right regulatory system. and we also have governments who are prepared to experiment with regulatory arbitrage for fintech. So that means that I think we're very well placed in those areas.
One thing I think European companies are good is in manufacturing, right? Manufacturing 4.0, right? European companies are very good in precision manufacturing. They're very good, good craftsmanship in Europe. And this is something that China.
Line with the map showing the number of engineers per country and then showing the number of startups per 100,000 citizens. That's super intriguing. There are certain countries that are punching way above their weight, like Israel or Iceland or Ireland. And we're sort of, as VCs, we're scratching our head very often and thinking why certain ecosystems haven't picked up in Europe as much as certain others. And with Anna, we had a very interesting conversation before. So Silicon Valley has this mantra of sort of fail fast, fail forward. And it sort of embraces failure and gives entrepreneurs another chance very quickly, knowing they will be more experienced. You've talked about the club, that where an entrepreneur has to lose $500,000 before they can join the club.
It's so important for a country to have to embrace risk-taking and failure. So we started a club called Startup Clinic, but basically the original name was Failure Club. You have to have lost $500,000 in investments before you join this club. But I think it was when the Vice Premier Li Keqiang was really encouraging people to go after startups. All of a sudden, you could tell there was a change in the mood amongst Chinese and sort of older Chinese population to actually think that doing a startup was actually a good thing and not necessarily you're the bad sheep.
Can I just quickly dig into Failure Club? So, does it work? Because we tend to always talk here about failure is a wonderful thing. That is, what we really mean is you talking about your past failures once you've been successful is a wonderful thing. Actually, if you've just failed, we're not really that interested. You're not here. You're not invited. So, are these really people who have they actually succeeded and then lost money? Have they already succeeded? Are they really? Is this something people want to be a member of? Does anyone turn up?
So we've actually changed the name because there's such a big debate internally because most people don't think anyone wants to go to Failure Academy. So that's why it's now called Startup Clinic. Except our boss, like the founder of our fund, is like, you guys are all so short-sighted. You don't understand because there's a phrase in Chinese called failure is the mother of success.
Coming back to this question about Europe, China, and US, that I mean, historically it was like you develop SAP or you develop Spotify, you expand to US, you become a global champion. Yes. At the moment, things are a little bit changing. If I remember the data, 2025 Asia will be the biggest. It's getting the biggest region in the world. I think also the simulation shows that China GDP will overcome the US GDP in the next 5 years. What I remember. That what you think what will make the European growth stories, success stories, global stories? Yes. Which direction? Expansion to US, expansion to China, or maybe expansion to Africa?
If expansion to China, then how?
Yes.
Is there a good way of doing expansion to China? I know, Francis, you've had thoughts on that.
Well, I think innovation is really the key. Okay, I mean, you see that some of the Nordic countries are very innovative. They have, cultivated, big companies in the game industry, for example, right? Tencent bought a big game companies, right?
In Finland.
Yeah.
The second largest European exit.
Yeah. So I think the reason is that they're very creative, right? I think China needs also new ideas, okay, and also technology as well. One thing Chinese companies, in my opinion, are good in application, commercial application, go-to-market. But Chinese companies, I think, have underinvested in R&D, in deep technology.
So expanding to China, I think what's interesting is that the examples I can think of, the successful companies that have gone into China, I think they've got one common thread, and you're going to correct me, but that's good, is that they're also associated with the luxury industry. Like my friend Jose Neves of Farfetch has JD.com and is doing well. I bumped into him on Saturday night, and he said that he's doing well in China. I saw Jonathan Newhouse yesterday of Condé Nast, chairman of Condé Nast. He's like, actually, China, we're really doing well. But otherwise, sort of the tech companies are broadly shut out, and we all talk about. I mean, I founded Mate.com with a Chinese entrepreneur. I founded Mate.com with a Chinese entrepreneur, and he didn't want to expand into China. You know, I thought we should have done it, but he pushed us against it. So
Airbnb have been looking for a China CEO for 3 years. Uber CEO took a long time to find too, because some of the best talents in China, they're going to raise money and do something on their own. They're not going to want to work for somebody else. I think it's, and then there are a lot of trust issues when you start working with a partner there, and just finding the right person. There are more failures to recent success. But I mean, there are some Chinese entrepreneurs that I think that who've talked to me about the Eastern Europe opportunity that they see in, for example, e-commerce. So I don't know for European startups, I would say probably just stay in Europe, right? I mean, for in the beginning.
Super helpful, very good advice. And Francis, and what do you think?
I think for a startup, it should focus on the market it knows the best, right, and builds the business from there. So I think.
But gaming, to what you mean, Chinese people love European gaming companies.
Yeah, that when gaming was like before this year, in 2017, the biggest existing was a gaming company exited through SoftBank to Tencent. That's clear. We have also a couple of notable technology investors in the room that maybe Sebastian could check this with us. That maybe Sebastian, what's your view on that? That if you would be investing in the kind of next Spotify in Europe, you think you will accept the kind of risk of China expansion or US expansion, or you rather prefer to keep this kind of company within European Union?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, of course, I'm fully aware that the Chinese market would be extremely difficult for any European company. So, based on the experience that I have, I would rather go first to the US. Being a European company, I would rather go to US. And this is what I advise to the Polish companies that I invest into, that if they want to grow globally, of course, they should look at European markets, but before even thinking about China, they should go to US. And if they manage to
the number of technology development in Europe, probably because also of small population, I believe, versus the success stories. But you also have a kind of strong track record in emerging markets. Yes, I think you've been very successful in Eastern Europe, in Central Eastern Europe. That what's your view on this potential expansion routes and sectors which you believe could make the next 10x unicorns in Europe?
10x.
10x unicorn.
That's a big order. But I think there are some in Europe, and from an investor point of view, you're probably going to get them in America, but it's a crowded field for investors there. You're not going to get the opportunity. It's a beauty parade, hence everyone's going for the same deal, and therefore the valuation is going through the roof. So there's too much demand for deals there. In Europe, it's less of a supply of capital for deals, so you probably get better value. But in terms of finding a pan-European startup, they exist. We have been trying to look for them with so-so kind of results. I think the UK is a very good landscape. They've been plowing a lot into it. And certainly there's more coming out of France and Germany. And I think Poland might have be a good place to look in the future. In terms of European companies going to Asia or startups in Asia, I don't know any example of that actually working, a European starting up anything in Asia and doing well.
So thank you, first of all, thank you, Francis, and thank you, Anna. Your insights and your experience is invaluable, and what you've done in China in technology and in venture is tremendous, and that's your growth trajectory multiplied by the sheer size of the market is changing things everywhere around the world. So we're hoping to be able to do more things with you and to entice you to spend more time with European companies.
Let me just say one final thing, which is that I think China needs to be international.